Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm joined by Andy Whyte. Andy and I are going to talk about his new book, which I've got a copy here. And here it is. It's MEDDICC, and it's all about the MEDDICC sales methodology. And we're going to work through this, and I'm going to talk about some things because I used to work with Andy many years ago. Anyway, Andy, where can people find you?
Thank you. Well, first up, Tim, thanks very much for having me on the show. Great to be here. As you mentioned, we've worked together. Well, you said it was many years ago. You made me feel old saying that. It was, well, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But where you can find me, all the usual places. I'm on LinkedIn, Andy Whyte, and it's Whyte with W-H-Y-T-E.
Yeah.
And then on Instagram and Twitter, it's actually just to be a bit confusing. It's MEDDICC. Which is another variation of MEDDICC, but it has a P after the second D before the I, which is just another variation. But it's also because those Twitter and Instagram handles were taken. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
And you actually you actually cover that, all the variants in the book. Why don't because we worked at a very large US software company together, which I don't think I'm allowed to mention, and you don't know this, but I actually talk about you a lot. You don't know what I'm going to say yet, because the thing that used to amuse me was that you at the time, unfortunately he's gone, but your dog had 2,000 followers on Twitter.
Yes, it was 5,000 followers on Twitter.
Yeah, and you did actually have another Twitter handle which was to do with sport, but we can't mention that either, can we? Because you but the thing about you, Andy, and I don't know whether you knew this was happening, was that when we were trying to roll out social and social selling, it was really difficult because it was so new, to actually convince the average salesperson at this company to actually get involved in social. So we used to come to you and go, Andy, do you know, we're thinking about doing this. Have you tried it? And then you'd go away and try it and you'd be successful. And everyone would go, so Andy, how did you do that? And you go, well, actually, I did this. So I don't know if you realized that was happening, but.
No, I didn't. I can remember the conversations we used to have about those types of things, but no, I didn't. I think the problem you face there, and I think, you know, it's no wonder you've made a business from it, Tim, is that, you know, that organization, that, you know, big red tech organization that we shall not name the name of, had a real mixture of, you know, very experienced salespeople, to which, you know, social was brand new, not just social selling, through to, you know, some up and coming kids, relatively speaking, like I was at the time. And I think what your job there to do, and what you did a very good job of, was kind of bridging the gap. And I bet, pound for pound, that the organization that we worked for inside of that tech organization had more social selling traction than any other tech, pound for pound.
At the time, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty cool. And I think a lot of those, actually, I was just looking at someone who I used to work with this morning, who is now, I think, managing director or CEO of a partner of the big red tech company that we should not name, and they're still at it. And I'm pretty sure that person would not be tweeting, doing their activity on LinkedIn as they are without, you know, the work that you and your team did. So it's quite cool. It's quite a good legacy.
Yeah, maybe. So you as a salesperson, you've basically come up through the ranks, and you actually talk about this. This is not a book about a journey, but you talk about how you've gone into meetings and misjudged sales. Yeah.
I mean, I think sales is I often liken sales to performance sports. And I think sales is so similar in that regard, in as much as you can be a very talented individual with all the attributes that make someone a naturally gifted salesperson, but without that experience, which you cannot teach the experience, you're always going to make those mistakes. And those mistakes are really important to make, because without making them, you wouldn't learn from them. So Oh yeah, I mean that role in which we used to work together, I not ashamed to admit I was way out of my depth going into that role. You know, you're talking about a guy. My first job was selling ERP software, which is of course the financial software,
Mm.
to companies with a turnover of over 1 billion, and you know, you're basically trying to convince CFOs that they should change the operating software in which their business runs upon. And I was, you know, a 20-something-year-old kid basically trying to convince them. And I had, you know, what I knew about accounting, you could stick in your eye and you wouldn't feel. So it was an interesting one, a steep learning curve to say the least.
So so why have you written this book?
Yeah, well, you're a much more successful writer than I am, Tim, so you may not agree with this, but I don't think anyone like me writes a book to become rich.
No.
You don't make a lot of money out of writing books, so it certainly was never the idea of, you know, being some sort of side hustle or extra business line. For me, this, and as you hold it up, I've got my copy here. This is my business card. This is the business card that I can therefore use in order to sort of almost show people my journey and what I've known, and actually get some of what I think is a slightly unique experience onto paper. And by that I mean that MEDDICC is a sales methodology. It's often called. People will debate whether it's a qualification methodology, a sales methodology, a framework, whatever. But let's put that to the side for a second. It's almost 30 years old, MEDDICC, and it's still used today, and arguably used more today than ever. And what you get from it is a real good understanding and approach to sales. But I don't know how many people would have gone through the same route that I have, which is to sort of go to one organization that doesn't use MEDDICC in enterprise sales, and then straight after go to one that does use it, but not very well. And then for them to go through a whole sort of refresh of flying the entire company into Texas to spend a week learning it, basically. And then to leave that organization to go to another organization that uses it badly, and then to implement it a couple of times myself, to my own sales teams. So what I felt I had was quite a unique perspective of doing it good, doing it bad, doing it myself. And I wrote a Medium post about the experience of implementing it. And it would, you know, almost 2 or 3 days wouldn't go by without someone reaching out and saying, "Oh, thank you very much for that. I learned from that," or "It was a great post," or some kind of little signal. And I just remember thinking, I should do something with this. I should, you know, and a book seemed like the right thing to do. And for ages, it was my go-to. I do a lot of like business flights around Europe, and it was my thing to do on flights because we don't have Wi-Fi on flights. It was the piece I had on a flight, and I'd open my laptop up and I'd write for 45 minutes to a couple of hours, which was normally the flight times. And I wasn't getting much done, and I always thought, well, whatever happens, maybe I'll just do a big blog post or something. But then, as you know, 2020 had other ideas, and you know, March I was saved my 4-hour round trip commute from London every day. So I thought, well, I better put it to good use. And so that's really 6, 7, 8 months later, I had the book to be grateful for.
And also, I think it's important to say that you're a cancer survivor, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, I am. Yeah. I guess where that comes in is that you start to get a real appreciation for time. You know, fortunately, I'm one of the super lucky people that I had testicular cancer, and I caught it very early. You know, and the reason why I mention that is because it's I think, you know, I like to take any opportunity to jump up on my soapbox to say, men in particular, but also ladies as well, for the men that you know, to make sure you check yourself, because any sort of different lumps, bumps, difference in shapes, you should find that stuff out and get straight to the doctor if there's anything out of sorts there. But to your point, why that's relevant to the book, I suppose, is that, you know, you kind of get a new appreciation for time. You don't want to waste any time if you have it.
And the fact that you were able to, you're saving 4 hours a day, then you need to invest. You can do something with that.
Indeed, yeah.
So I've read the book, and you know, probably because I know you, I can feel you kind of reading it to me.
Okay, cool.
And what I like about it is that you also share some really good sales tips in here. You take your it's not, well, you do go through each of the different letters, but each of the letters you basically put us into a sales scenario, and then talk us through that sales scenario about how you used it to your advantage. Before we came on, we were talking about traps in sales.
Yes.
And I said, I know few people that set them, and as we were saying, they're just great things to do.
Yeah. I think the thing with a trap is it all kind of rolls backwards from this idea that, for me, and I think most people would agree with this, the last thing you want to do in sales is to knock your competition.
Absolutely.
It should be one of the oldest rules in sales, but it seems to be, I don't know about you whether you're finding this in the field, Tim, but I'm noticing people are being a bit more abrupt now. They're being a bit less polite, and there's certainly in the field I work currently, it's the worst I've ever seen for our competitors knocking us.
In this year, people are desperate.
Yeah, true. That's a fair point. But I would say even just before 2020, it's something I've noticed happen more and more. But for me, it's always been very, very straightforward. You do not knock your competition. Number of reasons, but the one that never seems to get talked about is that actually customers don't like it when you because I always use this analogy. It's like, Tim, imagining you're about to buy a new car and you're looking at a Mercedes and you're looking at a BMW.
Yeah.
And I'm the Mercedes salesman. You come and you tell me I like this, whatever it is, medium-sized car, and you say I'm also looking at the BMW, and I go, Tim, come on, that's a rubbish car, and I start just slating it. I say, the fuel, all this stuff, the colours. Have you seen it? It looks horrible. It looks ugly. You're thinking, oh, I actually quite like that BMW, and instead of me criticizing the BMW, I'm criticizing your taste, your ability to come to a decision. So actually you take it and you actually think, well, why is the Mercedes salesman so insecure as well? So where traps come in is it's an opportunity for you to, with your customer, talk about things that you do that maybe your competition cannot do in such a manner which they find it out themselves. So you're not going into them and saying, hey, do you need like a square peg? Because ABC, our competitor, doesn't have a square peg, so you better go and check that out. You're saying, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, what I think from what I'm hearing is that you definitely, to move forward, you need this square peg, this square hole. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So what you want to make sure is that when you're moving forward with this project, you evaluate all people having square pegs or holes, whatever it is, and therefore it's not a great example, but hopefully what happens is your customer will go to your competitor and say, hey, we want the square. Have you got one of those? And as you said, I loved your analogy you used earlier. Sort of as you sort of walk out of the meeting, it's like you chucked a hand grenade behind you that's going to open up the opportunity for you.
Yeah. So let's. I thought it'd be good if we could walk through the different stages. We've got about 7 minutes left, so if we just do it very quickly, and if you've got any kind of case studies that you can work through, then.
Sure. So metrics is the short answer for metrics. M for metrics is basically, if you imagine you're sat with your customer and you've got a time machine to go 6 months into the future, and you're sat down doing your first or second QBR with the customer. What are the KPIs in which they're basing the success of your solution by? And what those are, if they're measurable, which they should be, those really are a good way of thinking about metrics.
No.
I split them into metrics ones, metrics twos. Metrics ones would be when you go into an early opportunity and you can say, normally with organizations like you, these are the metrics of success that we would build. And then as the opportunity evolves, you can turn it into metrics twos, which are their personal metrics.
And you talk about metric ones and metric twos in your books, just so people know.
Do indeed, yes. E is for economic buyer. This person is the overall authority on your deal. This is the person that can say yes when others say no, and no when others say yes. So this is generally somebody more senior who is not necessarily the budget owner, but it is someone that can create budget themselves. So you gotta sort of understand the lay of the land of the organization to understand.
You talk about this in the book, and I know it's a classic mistake for salespeople, which is that they quite often think that the person they're dealing with, who they say has the budget, is the budget holder and is the person that's going to sign the check, as it was in those days. But it probably isn't. They are going to go to somebody with a recommendation.
Correct. Yes, and that's a common mistake that people make, and it's often because two things. Number one is the person in question and the customer doesn't like to admit that they don't have the authority or the seniority, and the second is that salespeople have happy ears and they like to. Oh, you're the person? Great, no more work for me to do here. I can just rely on you to get this signed. And so that's exactly it.
And often, I mean, you talk about getting to the economic buyer, and often salespeople find that uncomfortable because it means the person you're talking to it could be your champion, it might not be. But the person you're talking to quite often says, don't go around me or don't go above me. Yeah. And that places you in a difficult situation. But what we've been seeing, certainly over in 2020, is that deals are basically going in our clients, the deals you're dealing with VP or SVP, it goes to a board and then it has to go to the CEO. And certainly there was a number of companies in the first lockdown in March, April, May who got caught on that and deals slipped.
Yes, exactly right. And to your point about deals slipping, there's a software company that specializes in implementing MEDDICC or MEDDICC into Salesforce and other CRMs, and they were able to do some data, and it said there's like an 80-20 rule. 80% of deals that have direct engagement with the economic buyer will close on time, on forecast, and only 20% of them will slip. Whereas if it's the other way around and you haven't got engagement with the buyer, 80% of those deals will be lost or will slip.
Yeah, I can well imagine that.
Yeah.
So I mean, if just before we go on to there's an interesting question. When MEDDICC was basically designed, they asked 3 questions, which was why do we win deals, why do we lose deals, and why do deals slip?
Correct.
And from that they basically built this sales methodology.
Yeah, it's a guy called Dick Dunkel, fabulous guy, who he still runs this exercise today, funnily enough. So he came up with he ran the exercise and found those 6 trending things, which became the acronym for MEDDICC. So yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do DDICC in 3 minutes.
In 3 minutes, all right. So decision, the 2 Ds is the decision criteria and decision process. We can roll those 2 together. The criteria is which basically the best way of thinking about this is if you've got an RFP, there's a list of questions. That becomes the criteria in its most basic sense. There's other things like holistic criteria, like what's your roadmap, what's your partner landscape, all those kind of things that come into that. But generally, it's the criteria in which the organization is going to base their decision. Your job as a seller is to influence that, first of all, to understand it, make sure you align your strengths to it, but also to try and influence it as you can to your benefits. The process is really when you're taking that technical criteria from a decision of should we buy this solution to how are we going to buy this solution, and what are all the steps and approvals and stuff that fall into that. The P is the paper process, which becomes the paper part of that, the contracting, the legal, the procurement side of things.
And that's really important. Again, another thing that's important, because I've seen so many salespeople, as you will have done, that say it's going to close the next quarter. It goes, so have we been set up as a supplier yet? And they go, what do you mean? Have you put our terms and conditions in front of their lawyers yet? No.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've worked on deals where the terms and conditions takes 3 months.
Oh yeah.
Easily. Because they use outside lawyers, and what do outside lawyers want to do? They just want to prolong the process as long as possible.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, exactly right. And then that's, it's working back from the effective date in which the compelling event works from, and figuring out all the things that go in from there, for sure. The I is, interestingly for me, I think one of, if not the most important part, it's the pain, implicate the pain, as I'd say. Really quickly on this point, I think there's 3 parts of I. There's you identify the pain, which is just spotting it, you've got this problem. Indicating it, which is you've got this problem, it's costing you this much money. and then implicating it, which is where I take it from you being aware of it to making you feel like it. So you actually have to feel like you want to solve the pain, which is a really important part, which 99% of sellers don't do. They just think good at the moment in the standards of sales is ROI, indicating business case. This is how much it's costing you. The bit that's missing is making you feel like it's such a big problem you really must fix it now, if not sooner.
Yes, and the classic, you talk about it in the book as well, is finding the pain and then immediately just pitching a product rather than actually, okay, so there's some pain. Okay, the classic example is if you say to me, how are you doing? You go, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And you go, no, how are you really doing? And actually getting to, and actually asking people some really probing questions about what that pain means and the implication to the company and the implication to them.
Indeed, yeah, exactly right. And that's just what you're talking about there is good discovery, right?
Yeah.
And then the next up, you've got your 2 C's, and I'll do those in quickly. The number one most important of all of MEDDICC, no matter what still stage you're in, is the champion. No champion, no deal. Big champion, big deal. It's as simple as that. There's been actually a time very recently I was like, wow, if we win this deal, will be the first time that I've ever seen us win a deal without a champion. And of course, I was proven right in as much as that we weren't going to win the deal because we didn't have a champion. It's absolutely imperative that you have a champion, and it's imperative that you have a qualified champion. And that is somebody who has power and influence. It's somebody that has a vested interest in your success, and it's somebody that is selling internally for you. Those 3 things. Other people will say, well, it's also someone that can introduce you to the economic buyer. I would say that comes under one of those 3 criteria, but that it's absolutely imperative that you have a champion.
Yes.
Yeah. And the last one is competition, which we talked about a little bit earlier. So I don't need to go too much into that. The only thing I will say, people often make the mistake of thinking that their competition is their rivals. It's, we're one email service provider, that one's another email service provider. Actually, it's broader than that. Your competition is any one personal thing or initiative that is competing for the same resource you are. And that's not just money, it can be implementation resource. If your solution requires 10 people, 10 hours a week, there might be 10 other projects that are more important. So that's the competition. It's not just your rival solutions.
Yeah, we've been in situations before where salespeople say it's not a priority for them. And it's actually, no, you're being outsold.
Yes.
It probably is a priority, but the salespeople for selling the competing products for that budget are better at articulating the pain, and therefore they're going to pay the money to realize that pain, to solve that pain.
Exactly right. That is it. 100%.
Andy, it's been great talking to you again, and love the book. Mine comes across blue on the screen, but it's actually green. Yeah, I thought maybe you got some special green ones, but it reminds me of there was a band called Big Country that had a blue cover, a green cover, and a red cover, but that just proves how old I am. So thank you. It's great to see someone spending their time properly during lockdown. Great book, and I wish you the best of luck with it.
Thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure catching up. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. Good to talk to you. Thanks, Andy. And in terms of getting hold of you, LinkedIn,
MEDDICC.com, Andy Whyte on MEDDICC, on LinkedIn, sorry, and MEDDICC on Twitter and Instagram.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Good to talk to you.